This is a 2018 Aston Martin Vanquish S Volante, painted in divine red. It is one of the most beautiful cars on sale today, but also one of the most expensive. This one has a sticker price of $357,961, making it the most expensive Aston Martin on sale today and the most expensive new car I've ever tested. Today, I'm going to show you why this thing costs as much as a house. I've borrowed this Vanquish from Exclusive Automotive Group, which is Aston Martin of Washington, D.C., the Aston dealer here in Northern Virginia, the same one that sold me my V8 Vantage with my famous bumper-to-bumper unlimited mile warranty. Today, I'm going to show you all of its cool quirks and unusual features, and then I'm going to get it out on the road, which is a thrill, and then I'm going to give it a Doug score. And to read more of my thoughts on the Vanquish S Volante, click the link below to go to autotrader.com/oversteer, where I've also written a story about the other most beautiful cars on sale today, according to me, that are currently listed for sale on AutoTrader. I'll start with the obvious stuff. The Vanquish S Volante uses a 580 horsepower, 5.9 liter V12 mated to an 8-speed automatic transmission and rear-wheel drive. Now, the base price of this car is $305,650, meaning that this one has $52,000 in options. That V8 Vantage I mentioned earlier, the one that I got with the bumper-to-bumper unlimited mile warranty. Yeah, I paid less for that Aston Martin than the price of the options on this one. Here are a few of my favorite Vanquish Volante options. First off, we have to start with, I think you would agree, the ventilated front seats, which cost $1,595 for ventilated front seats. It's the same price as a Craigslist Miata. Next up, how about the internal shadow pack? Also $1,595. No idea what that is, but it sounds kind of cool. And then the glass key. I'll get to that in a moment. That is $795. This car has carbon fiber shift panels. That's $3,200. And then there's an umbrella that comes with the car. It's in the trunk. It's $295 for an umbrella. Of course, there are also a couple of other really expensive options. For example, the carbon exterior package is $9,900. The Philograph quilting, $3,800. I'll get to that in a minute. And the full-length carbon trim in the front, that's $2,300. Oh, and these wheels, these 20-inch 10-spoke gloss black wheels, $7,300 for a set of wheels. Don't scratch them. Now, I'm going to start this under the hood and first take a moment to gaze at the glory of an Aston Martin 6-liter V12, except, wait a minute, earlier I said it was a 5.9-liter V12, so am I wrong or are they wrong? They are. It's a 5.9 liter V12. I guess Aston Martin is rounding up, and while they're doing that, 6 is basically 10. So really, you're looking at a 10 liter V12. Now, another interesting thing you'll notice is just how far back the engine is set under the hood. It's basically behind the front wheels in the middle of the car almost for weight distribution purposes. Another interesting thing under the hood, Aston Martin places a plaque under the hood of all its cars next to the engine that gives the name of the person who gave the engine its final inspection. So thank you, Victoria Bursies. It sings. Another thing I love under the hood are these warning labels here that tell you that if you're working under the hood, you might get hit by a hook. If only they had given these warning labels to the kids, and I know what you did last summer. Next up, moving on to the interior, and one of the most distinctive things about the Vanquish, that would be its key situation. Now, this car doesn't have a traditional ignition switch like some cars, and it doesn't have a push button like a lot of other cars. Instead, to start this car, you insert the key into the center control stack on the Aston Martin logo. You push the Aston Martin logo down with the key, and that starts the car. Now, if that isn't unusual enough, here's something else that's crazy. This car has a glass key. It costs $795, and it has the Aston Martin logo on the base. So when you insert the key into the center controls, when you push the Aston Martin logo down with the glass key, it shows the Aston Martin logo after the car is started in glass, and it almost makes it seem like the key is hidden in the center control stack. It's really, really cool. Now, you might think a glass key that costs $795, that's the most interesting thing about the key situation, but it isn't. Check this out, the glass key doesn't have a little hoop for you to insert it onto your key ring. In order to put your glass Aston Martin key on your key ring, you have to buy a separate leather pouch from Aston Martin that you can hook onto your key ring. But then that presents a problem, because if it's in the leather pouch, how do you insert it into the center control stack to start the car? Well, every time you get in your Vanquish with your glass key, you have to remove it from the leather pouch, and then you can insert it into the center control stack. This is one of the most bizarre things in any car, but it is kind of cool, and that glass key is gorgeous. And this strange process of taking the key out of the leather pouch, well, that's just the price you pay for beauty. Next up, something you may have already noticed as I talked about the keys, this car doesn't have a traditional transmission selector here in the middle, and although it has paddle shifters, you don't use them to get it into gear. Instead, after you've started this car, you use buttons on the center control stack next to where you insert the key in order to put it into park, reverse, neutral, and drive. Little lights light up when you're in each gear. It's a very unusual situation, but it's one that Aston Martin has actually been using for quite a while. Next up, discussing these center controls themselves. I really like the center controls in this car. I really like these circular buttons to control the climate control, the radio volume, and to change the radio station. They're all really nice. They feel really good. They're nice to press. But the best buttons in the center controls by far are the glass buttons below the climate controls. They change various functions in the climate controls, and you can also use them to turn on the heated or ventilated seats. And there's another set of glass buttons down below those. Although the term button is actually wrong. These aren't buttons. Instead, they're just glass screens with various functions. And when you push them, it gives a little vibration so that you know that it got your command. I really like touching them. It's fun to drive down the road and press them. Now, below the glass panels, there are 4 traditional buttons. It's just the hazard lights, the parking sensors, turning off traction control, and then, of course, my favorite one on the left with a checkered flag, that would be the launch control button. Now, beyond the buttons themselves, the infotainment system in this car has a couple of weird quirks and features, as they often do in high-end luxury cars with a lot of features packed into the infotainment systems. For example, in this particular car, the infotainment system actually shows the movement of the radio button as you move it. So you move it down below and it shows you move it up above, which is a little bit odd. Now, when you go into the vehicle settings, one of the interesting things I've discovered is the power meter. It gives you a little disclaimer saying track use only, but once you get past that and completely ignore it, it shows you exactly how much power and torque you're making at any given moment. It's actually kind of cool. Who knew you only needed like 40 horsepower to make a right turn? You can have it on while you're driving and see how much power you're making at any given moment while you drive down the street. Another thing I like, this car has a digital speedometer in the gauge cluster, as a lot of sports cars do, and using the infotainment system, you can switch whether the digital speedometer is on the right or on the left. Right, left, right, left. I don't know why that's available or why anyone would really want to change it, but it's one of the configurable things in this car. And so, by the way, is the background for the infotainment system. You want sand? Well, you can have it, of course. Next up, we absolutely have to talk about the stitching in this car, or as Aston Martin calls it, the phylograph quilting, which is a $3,785 option. Call it what you want, it is awesome. I dare say it might be worth that option price. It looks like a spider web. It's so cool. It's on the door panels, it's on the seats, it's on the back seats. Some of the coolest stitching I've seen in a car. Forget about symmetry, this is just awesome. Next up, let's talk about the back seats. Yes, this car has back seats. They're minuscule, and yes, I will try to climb into them in a moment, but first, I want to talk about the roll bar. Yes, there is a roll bar back here. You can't see it, just like you can't see it on most convertibles, but like in most convertibles, that's because it's hidden and it doesn't pop up until it's needed. If all 4 wheels leave the ground, if the car starts to detect a rollover, the roll bar will shoot up with an explosive charge with incredible velocity through these panels behind the rear seats that say, "Do not cover." And the roll bar is designed to support the entire weight of the vehicle should it be necessary. If your roll bar has come up in your convertible, that's because you've done something very, very bad. Although I've heard stories of people driving into the service department saying, "Oh, I just went over a bump and it came up." And no, you didn't. And next up, yes, this car has back seats, and yes, I'm going to try to climb inside them, true to my word. Now, in order to facilitate this, I've already moved the front seat forward about 6 inches. So here goes. Oh boy. I'm so glad this one's a convertible. Ah, pretty good. Oh, now I have a problem, don't I? Well, my butt is not in the seat and my feet are not on the floor, but other than that, this was highly successful. Oh, and the front seat isn't in a position where you could drive the car. Needless to say, you won't buy this for back seats. Next up, a couple of other interesting interior details in this car. Now, the air vents in the middle are fairly normal, standard, straightforward air vents, but the air vents on either side are placed at this oddly bizarre, severe angle. The strange thing is they are also normal rectangular air vents, but it's almost like Aston was like, no, we can't do rectangles, we gotta do something weird to them. And so they did. Next up, the center console lid. Now, in your normal car, the center console lid is held down with a flimsy little plastic piece, but in this car, it's a nice metal rivet that's grafted into a beautiful leather loop with hand stitching in a contrasting color. And when you want to close it, just set it down and press it, and it closes ever so nicely. Another interesting thing in the interior of the Vanquish, it has some really high-end Bang & Olufsen sound system that probably costs more than my home. When you start the car, the speakers on the dashboard rise up to provide you with music. Turn the car off and they automatically fall back down into their resting position until it's time to provide you with more sound. Another neat trick in this car, something you probably don't know even if you have one of these things, you want to fold the mirrors in, just press both mirror adjustment buttons, left and right at the same time, and they fold in automatically. That's a little trick borrowed from when Aston Martin and Volvo were both owned by Ford. Volvo did that, and so Aston Martin followed suit, and they've been using it ever since. Next up, the Vanquish has the smallest interior clock of any car I've ever seen. Is it in the center console? No. The center control stack? No. The dashboard? No. None of those things. It's in the gauge cluster. And not only is it in the gauge cluster, it takes up about 3 pixels in the very center, so only the driver could possibly know what time it is. Now, speaking of items that only the driver has access to, let's talk about the convertible top. Unlike in virtually every other convertible, the top button is not located in the center console, but instead on the driver's door, so only the driver can decide when to raise and lower the top. Now, I recently did a review of a convertible where I didn't put the top up or down, and you people got very angry, and so, well, enjoy. If you somehow manage to sit through that, you must really love convertible tops. Or perhaps you're asleep. Anyway, now it's time to put it back down. Enjoy! And so moving on to the outside of the Vanquish, one of the things you'll notice if you take a long look at this car is there's no fuel door. You don't see it on the driver's side rear fender, you don't see it on the passenger side rear fender. So where is it? It's hidden on the top of the driver's side rear fender. To access it, you push a little button on the driver's door panel only when the car is off, and then the fuel door pops open and you can stick fuel in this thing. Otherwise, you'd never know it was there. Next up, we gotta talk turn signals. Aston Martin's been using the same turn signal design for like 10 years, and yet they are still the best in the business. Check them out. Look at that. Isn't that awesome? Need I say more? They're gorgeous. And the turn signals on the side are really cool too. Check them out. It's mandated by law in Europe that all cars must have turn signals somewhere on the side in addition to the front and the back, so Aston figured, well, why not make them look good? And they do. Next up, we gotta talk door handles. It's been a while since I owned my Aston Martin. If you haven't been following me for that long, you might not know how to get into one of these. So here's how it works. When you walk up to Aston Martin, the door handles are flat against the door, so it's not immediately obvious how you open them. But the way you open them is you push the front part, and then the rear part sort of opens up. You grab that, open the door, and you get in. It's not the most intuitive door handle in the industry, but when the door handles are sitting there flush against the door, they do look pretty cool. And speaking of the doors, another interesting thing about the doors in most Aston Martin models is that they open upwards. Take a look at this car with the doors open. Now, there are 2 reasons that Aston Martin says that they do this. One is so that if you park next to a high curb, when you open the door, you won't scrape it on the curb. It opens upward and it'll clear it. The other is, I presume, because the car looks like a bird taking flight when the doors are up, and it looks pretty cool. Another interesting thing is on the outside of the trunk, there's no immediately obvious button or latch you can use to open the trunk. So how do you do it? It's this nice little silver button placed right in the middle below the Aston Martin logo. Press it and the trunk opens right up. Even the trunk opener in this car is classy. Another thing I like in the back of this car, that would be the reverse lights. Now, when the reverse lights are off, you'd never even know they were there, but when they're on, it's sort of this gradual white light that just becomes a little bit whiter and whiter until you get to the end of the taillight. And then, of course, you must be wondering, how does a headlight washer work in an Aston Martin? Time to find out. So the Vanquish has a lot of cool features and a lot of crazy options, and it's also beautiful. But when I'm spending $357,961 for a car, I like to know, how does it drive? Time to find out. All right, driving the Vanquish S. All right, I gotta put up the windows for sound, even though I look like an idiot now. I love, top-down V12. Does life get any better than this? All right, driving this thing now on a nice Virginia country road. I can't speed. It's 35 miles an hour, in case the Virginia State Troopers are watching. I'm behind a Grand Caravan, which is kind of a shame. But it does give you the opportunity to experience one of this car's other capabilities beyond its performance, which is its, luxuriousness. The thing about Aston Martin that's cool is it sort of bridges that gap between crazy all-out Ferrari performance and, luxury Rolls-Royce. And Bentley also bridges that gap, but more on the luxury side. Aston Martin is more on the performance side. A lot of car enthusiasts watch these videos and they, how would anybody get that? You could have a Huracan or a Ferrari. Well, not everybody wants to go 200 miles an hour and have a car that looks like a doorstop. Some people want to have fun in a car, but also it's more beautiful and more relaxed. The interior's nicer. The experience is just a little bit more luxurious. And that's what this car provides. Now, in years past, I've made fun of Aston Martin's automatic transmission because it's kind of slow. And this car, it's not a dual clutch, but it's gotten a lot faster. The old speed shift or sport shift or whatever it was called in 2007 that was so crappy, that's gone. And the refinement is considerably better. It's still not as quick as a dual clutch, but it's nice and quick. Oh, that sound. That is how a sports car should sound. All right, go for it. Wow. It's really fast. It isn't, to be clear, Ferrari 488 fast or anything like that. This is not one of those frenetic, crazy sports cars, despite the fact that it has a 580 horsepower V12. It's also pretty comfortable, pretty nice, and I know I'm driving down the street in this beautiful, almost piece of art. I mean, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous car, this one. I will say there are some drawbacks in the interior, the biggest of which is the gauge cluster is still sort of the old school Aston gauge cluster. It's changed now with the DB11, but the Vanquish uses sort of a combination of new and old. Most of the interior is newer and looks nice, but the gauge cluster is still from the 06, 07 V8 Vantage era, and it looks a little bit out of place in the car with this price tag. But the benefit of a convertible is you get to experience that amazing sound. You get to hear all that exhaust note, and I will always prefer a convertible over a coupe, in part for that reason. Yeah, the handling is really surprisingly good. The car feels stable and planted. Body roll is controlled. This really is the ultimate Aston Martin. It sort of delivers the best in everything. You pay for it, but you get the really nice interior with all the crazy stitching and stuff that I already showed you. And also you get this incredible performance, which, to be honest, is actually an improvement over what I was expecting. And so that's the 2018 Aston Martin Vanquish S Volante. It's one of the most expensive cars on sale today, but it's also one of the most beautiful and one of the most luxurious and sporty and thrilling. No, it doesn't quite have the same performance as a new Ferrari or the same luxury as a new Rolls-Royce, but if you want a car that combines them both along with gorgeous head-turning styling, this is the car for the low, low price of a 4-bedroom house in Cincinnati. And now, on to the Doug score. Starting with the weekend categories and styling, this one is simple. The Vanquish is truly beautiful, and while it isn't quite perfect, it's close, and it gets a 9 out of 10. Acceleration, the Vanquish does 0 to 60 in an amazing 3.6 seconds, which earns it an 8 out of 10. Handling is sharp, not like a supercar, but obviously better than average, and it gets a 7 out of 10. Cool factor is obviously high, especially with that great exhaust note and the V12 under the hood, giving it an 8 out of 10. Importance is also strong, but it's not quite on the level of most new Ferraris or Lamborghinis in terms of significance, and it earns a 7 out of 10. That brings the total weekend score to 39 out of 50, which ties the less expensive Aston Martin DB11. Next up are the daily categories, starting with features, and the Vanquish is good, but not quite on par with newer models. The Vanquish came out almost 5 years ago, and while it's been updated, it doesn't have all the latest gadgets, so it gets a 6 out of 10. Comfort is good, great for a car that does 0 to 60 in 3.6 seconds, but obviously it's a little harsh in a broader sense, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Quality is high, and the materials are excellent, though they aren't quite as good as in the DB11, in part due to that old-school gauge cluster. And then there's the fear of Aston Martin reliability, which is enough of a worry to drop things down to a 7 out of 10. Practicality is predictably bad. The Vanquish has just under 10 cubic feet of cargo space, and the rear seats are basically unusable, so it gets a 3 out of 10. And finally, there's value. This is a properly fast car with quick acceleration, a great sound, and amazing styling, but Aston Martin depreciation will take a bite out of that big sticker price, so it gets just a 5 out of 10, making for a total daily score of 27 out of 50, also tied with the DB11. Added up, and the Doug score is 66 out of 100. That's a strong showing for an excellent, beautiful car with amazing performance. Some more gadgets and a slightly lower sticker price would put it at the top of its game. $295 for an umbrella. Is it a magic umbrella?